Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the My Career Path podcast. Today we're going to be talking about 10 life-changing books that transformed my thinking. These are the books that I've read over the past year that have kind of changed my mindset on a couple of different things to kind of get me more motivated about the podcast and about life and work in general. So I want to share that with you today. So if you like this type of content, make sure to let me know down below, leave a like, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a future episode. Let's get into it with book number 1. So the first book has been referenced in a couple of different episodes now, and it is Effortless by Greg McKeown. And Greg McKeown kind of challenges the idea that success has to be painful. He introduces the concept of making things easier by simplifying decision-making through automation, like meal prepping or setting reminders. And he identified methods and tools for you to get into that effortless state, so that work doesn't feel so dreary and dreadful and instead actually feels fulfilling and fun. So identifying effortless actions, little small steps that actually produce amazing results. Greg McKeown talks about past a certain point, more effort doesn't actually produce better performance. It almost sabotages us instead. This comes from the idea of burnout and doing enough to keep you motivated and working on your goals rather than completely exhausting ourselves to the point of giving up entirely and then having to find that energy and motivation again. So the main takeaway I have from this book is instead of working harder, find ways to make your priorities effortless. One of my favorite quotes from this book, define what done looks like. This is something I've talked about in episodes prior. Just make sure when you're setting off for a task or a project that you know how much work you're going to put into it and define what done is so that it doesn't feel like this endless mountain that you're trying to climb. It'll keep you from burning out as well as making sure you're making those small, consistent steps towards your goal and actually making progress and moving forward. Book number 2 is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And I promise not all the books are by Greg McKeown, but these are definitely 2 over the past year that I've read that have really kind of challenged my way of thinking about work and about things that I need to get done and making it a little bit more fun and energized, because that's something that I've struggled with in my life where I just feel like a huge project or a huge thing that's going on, it just feels so overwhelming, and finding ways to make it effortless as well as focusing on what's actually essential has been really helpful. Essentialism is about ruthless focus. McKeown argues that success isn't about doing more, it's actually about doing less, but in a better way. When we focus on what is most important, it leads us to taking the biggest steps towards what we actually want to accomplish. Too often we get bogged down with all of the little things we have to do every day because it's what we've always done. And sometimes we just have to take a step back and ask ourselves, is this really important? Is this really essential? And he also talks about the power of saying no. Sometimes you just have to say no. No. It can be really easy at work, especially when your boss is approaching you with all sorts of different priorities and projects, and we feel like we have to say yes because our job kind of depends on it. But being able to say no and explain that there are other priorities that are actually a higher priority helps us kind of not feel so bogged down every day at work. The main takeaway, the most successful people aren't the busiest, they're just the most selective. One of my favorite quotes is, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And this quote is just awesome as it shows that you need to be in charge of your own life. It is, after all, the one thing that you can control. Other people, like our bosses and coworkers, can fill our schedules with whatever they want, whatever they deem as most important. But when we actually have things to do, when we set aside time for ourselves, then it can be a little bit easier to say no and actually be able to explain why. So be able to prioritize and organize your life, and it allows you to feel better and get back into that effortless state at work and work on what's actually essential. Book number 3 is The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and Eagle Eye viewers might notice that it is actually sitting on my bookshelf back there. A lot of these books I rent either audiobooks or just pick up from the library, so I don't have the physical copy on hand, but this is one that I actually bought. I think it was a recommendation after listening to a Dave Ramsey show. And so Michael Easter's book is all about seeking discomfort. He spent over a month in the Alaskan wilderness and learned how misogi, which is a Japanese idea of an impossible challenge, can actually rewire our mindset. When we set our minds to attempt something that's impossible and work towards it and gets us out of our comfort zone, we actually feel more fulfilled in our lives. And a lot of the time, modern conveniences make us weaker mentally and physically. Not to say these things aren't nice, but it definitely makes us more likely to stay where we are and be content rather than pushing ourselves forward and actually seeking out a challenge. A lot of modern day comforts pull us to stay in our comfort zone and not allow us to grow and stretch as we probably should be doing. And my favorite idea from this book is the idea of problem creep. If you think back in the day of our early ancestors, they probably were more concerned about where their next meal was going to come from rather than when their DoorDash order was going to arrive. As we experience fewer problems in our lives, we don't become more satisfied, We just lower our threshold for what an actual problem is. Instead of worrying about where our next meal is going to come from or if we're going to have shelter for the night, we feel an equal problem that our iPhone isn't charging or not keeping the battery like it's supposed to. I mean, what is up with that? Why does technology do that? It's so annoying. So we don't experience less problems. It's just that the problems feel bigger than they really are. So seek challenges that push you beyond your comfort zone. Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. Great book. The fourth book is Traction by Gino Wickman. And one of my favorite quotes was, "Vision without execution is just hallucination." So the idea comes from you actually have to have the vision in your head and then transpose it onto paper to make it a little bit more of a reality. So Wickman actually presents the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or the EOS, which is a framework for kind of business growth. It's something that I've been working on in my own life as well as with this podcast and this show, finding ways to actually break down your vision into more manageable steps and define your long-term goals and actually your core values. The whole idea in the book is to help design your business and your life as a way for you to actually gain traction and move forward instead of just spinning your wheels and staying in the same place. Are the things you're actually doing pushing you forward, or are you just spinning your wheels for the sake of it? Create systems that make your business scalable. Build scorecards and ways to actually track what's being accomplished and what's being worked on and what is actually generating traction for you. Identify some key areas in your life or in your business or work that you actually want to work on that push you forward. This also goes with the idea that we should write down and track what we're doing because that's how we ultimately see progress. It's a lot easier to see where we are compared to where we have been when we have a little bit more of a roadmap as to where we've been. So a vision needs to get out of your head and onto paper as it then can become a reality. And it's why I like journaling so much, because it helps organize my thoughts, lets me hear my own voice, which is something that I think we all kind of struggle with nowadays. So it helps me kind of get those ideas onto paper and make them into a reality. Main takeaway from Traction: business success isn't just about great ideas, it's all about execution. So find ways to track your progress and know what actually generates momentum for your life and your business. The next two books have to do with habits. Number 5 is Atomic Habits by James Clear. One of my favorite quotes: "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And this was something I explained in the McDonald's video a few videos back. Make sure to check that out if you haven't already. But the idea is that when we create systems that allow us to thrive and to actually flourish, then we fall back on those when things kind of get rough. It makes things a little bit easier to find success because we have a consistent way of doing that. And James Clear also talks about the habit loop, which is the idea of there's usually a cue that then starts a craving within us that we then respond to, and then we get the reward, usually a rush of dopamine or something like that. So when there is a cue, like we are bored waiting for a meeting to start, we start craving our phone to scroll on Instagram or TikTok so that we get that little bit of dopamine. You have the cue of, hey, I'm kind of bored. The craving, now I want to watch something or entertain myself for the next few minutes. The response, grab my phone, open Instagram, open TikTok, and then the reward, hopefully find some funny cat or dog memes that I can enjoy and maybe share around the table. When we understand what sets our habits in motion, we can better overcome our bad habits and replace them with more fruitful ones. Another idea I really liked from Atomic Habits is the idea of identity-based habits. Instead of saying, I want to run, think, I'm a runner. Change your mindset. Instead of a habit being something we do, make it something that you actually are. And then, of course, the 1% rule, which is going to be touched on and something I've shared in a bunch of other videos as well, is just improving 1% every day leads to exponential growth over time. Find a small thing you can do every day and find ways to be a little bit better every day. Consistency really is the key. The next book is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and this is a little bit more of a scientific approach to habits, but I still found it really useful. One of the main quotes I really liked is, "The difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do." So a lot of that is where you spend your time. What are you focusing on? Because that ultimately determines who you are. And we can daydream and think about who we want to be, and then we have to change the things in our lives to actually make that become a reality. One of the things he talks about in the book is identifying bad habits and having to replace them with a better one. We can't just quit a habit. We have to find something to take its place. So find ways to change your response to the habit cue. Instead of maybe a sugary sweet after dinner, maybe find a little healthier, tasty alternative, like a healthy protein bar or maybe some fruit. He also talks about the idea of keystone habits. These certain habits actually trigger positive changes in other areas. As you pick up more and more positive habits and they become more prevalent in your lives, then it becomes easier to pick up new ones and start new things. You start making more progress on the goals that you already have set for yourself. So understand the triggers behind your habits and then try to rewire them so that they actually work in your favor. The next book I really liked was Leadership and Self-Deception, and this was by the Arbinger Institute, and it's a book that's written a little bit more like a story rather than just a direct self-improvement book, and so I really liked that. And the book explains how self-deception can kind of lead us to blame others while ignoring our own role in those problems. We kind of find ways to blame other people, even though a lot of that could be attributed to ourselves, and we can ultimately take responsibility. One of the best ideas from this book is the concept of being in the box versus out of the box. The idea of being in the box is you see other people as objects, whereas you're out of the box and you see people as human beings. We have to be able to understand that other people have their own motivations and desires and wills, and they're not just a means to an end. They're not someone that we can just boss around or have to work with. They're a person with desires and wants just like us. And so finding a way to actually see that when you're in a leadership role can actually help you push the team to move forward and help everyone align on the same goals. So true leadership comes from changing our own mindset first, instead of having to change the behaviors of the other people around us. Great leadership starts with self-awareness and empathy, and control the one thing that you're actually able to control: you. Another book that I've really liked was called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and this was actually recommended to me by a college professor while I was going to Utah State University. So Chris Voss is an FBI hostage negotiator, and he talks about the importance of negotiating and actually understanding what the other person is saying. One of my favorite things that I've applied in my own life is the mirroring technique, which is basically you repeat the exact same words or phrases that someone tells you so that it actually helps build that connection with people. When you mirror the last thing a person says, it subconsciously lets them know that, hey, this person is actually listening. This person is actually understanding what I'm saying. It makes them more willing to negotiate so that you guys can find equal footing. Another thing that Chris Voss discusses in this book is the idea of tactical empathy. People want to be understood. Give them that, and you have leverage. When people are actually understood, they're a lot more open to negotiating. Everybody can get what they want. When people are understood, they're more open to negotiation, and everybody can get what they want. The other thing that Chris Voss talks about is the idea that negotiation is part of our everyday lives. It's not just for hostage negotiation settings. When you're trying to ask for a raise, when you're trying to sell a product or service to a customer, these come down to negotiations. And if you're finding ways that you can actually connect with people and make sure that they are understood, like in the quote before, it actually gives you leverage to actually close the deal or get both sides what they want. Negotiation isn't just about winning, it's about understanding and influencing in the way that you would like it to be done. The number 9 book is one of my all-time favorites, and it is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Good is the enemy of great. Greatness is largely a matter of conscious choice. This is one of the few books that I've read several times in my life. Collins and his team studied a bunch of different companies and tried to figure out what led a company to make that leap from just a good, all right company to a massive success and a great company. One of the main things he talks about is level 5 leadership. The best leaders are humble, not egotistical. They seek to look in the mirror rather than outside. What are the things that they can control and actually have responsibility and authority over that they can actually change, rather than focusing on the things they can't control, other people's behaviors. And the other idea that I really like from Good to Great is that greatness isn't about one big breakthrough, it's about disciplined consistency. There's a lot of other things in this book that I could probably make a whole nother video on it. I think I did a podcast episode a long time ago, and maybe I'll reread it and do another episode here in the future. But highly recommend Good to Great if you're in the business mindset, even if you're just trying to figure out how to make that leap from good to great yourself as a person. Highly recommend it. The last book is From Paycheck to Purpose by Ken Coleman. This is kind of something that started me off on this journey. When I started this podcast, it was mainly about how do I find and connect with people so that I can identify what career paths would work for me and what careers are actually out there and share them with the world. And Ken Coleman kind of takes that idea to a head in this book. He lays out a roadmap for finding actually meaningful work. The first thing is get clear. Identify what talents, passions, and missions you have. Identify who you are and what you want to actually do. The next is get qualified. Build the necessary skills and experiences. Number 3 is get connected. Network strategically to land opportunities. Talk with people about their jobs. Talk with people who know people in that industry so that you can have a little bit more of a way in instead of just hopelessly sending off resumes, hoping that it lands with someone and that they'll hire you on the spot. And 4th, Get started, take action instead of overthinking. A lot of the times we just worry about a paycheck and we don't really focus on what actually gives us purpose. So investing time in yourself will always generate some kind of reward. So spend your time wisely, because work is a big part of our lives. And if we're just drudging our way through it, it makes our life feel very unfulfilled and unsatisfied. So identify ways that you can actually use that to your advantage and actually fulfill your purpose, because there is a purpose for you out there. So of course, these books have completely changed how I think about success, productivity, and leadership. If you've read any of them, let me know in the comments down below which one impacted you the most. And if there's any books that you would highly recommend to me, let me know down below in the comments. Hopefully I'll do an episode in the future and it's something that we can talk about here in the back. And if you want more book breakdowns, hit that like button and subscribe. If there's a book you'd like me to review, let me know down in the comments. If there's a book that you've really liked that has really changed your thinking in business or in your life, let me know. I'd be happy to read it and maybe I'll do an episode of it in the future. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later. See ya.